Okay, here we are with the Draft Indy Podcast. I think it's episode 5. Tonight we got the full crew with us, and including special guest, the authority of Colts Authority, Kyle Rodriguez. How you doing tonight, Kyle?
For whatever that's worth, I'm doing good, guys.
Good. So I guess what we're gonna do here tonight is we're just gonna kind of ask. Just gonna make Kyle the centerpiece of this episode. We're gonna ask him questions. We've got some questions from Twitter, and we're just gonna kind of just go off that and just see where that leads us. Hopefully, we won't talk for too long. But my first question, I'm just gonna jump right into my first question. Kyle, this is kind of serious. So, do you think we should IR Luck and go with Matt Hasselbeck for the rest of the season?
I mean, Matt Hasselbeck.
No.
Zero interceptions. Really? Andrew Luck had 7 interceptions in the first 3 games. Need I remind you? So, I mean, I don't know what else there is to say. I wrote an article yesterday for Bleacher Report that said Andrew Luck needs to avoid turnovers against the Patriots. Matt Hasselbeck can do that.
Yeah.
True.
I mean, it's his track record is not very good at all. It's the source of a lot of drinking for me. When we get into this topic of the Patriots, it always just makes me sad. I mean, legitimately sad. Like, I've already taken a day off for Monday. Either way, I'm sleeping all day, or I'm gonna just wake up and be sad. And Twitter, either way, on Monday is gonna be absolutely insane.
No, it's gonna be terrible.
I don't think I'll be able to do it.
Yeah,
No, I don't think.
I'm out all week. Twitter Tuesday all week.
And they're gonna be right. Everything they say will be right.
Unless by some miracle the Colts win, and then it'll be Twitter Tuesday because everybody will be talking about how the Colts are going to win the Super Bowl and that all their problems are solved, even though neither of those things will probably be true.
Well, I'll tell you, Kyle, that sounds wonderful.
Winning sounds great. I mean, I've marked it off my list completely of things to happen on Sunday.
Yeah. It's theoretically possible.
It's theoretically possible, but I don't think it'll happen.
I mean,
is it theoretically possible? Like, in this universe, is it possible?
I've done the numbers, and no, not really.
PFF would say no. I mean, their numbers are absolute, and I don't know if you guys are aware. I checked this out today. You can get the new PFF for free for 1 day, and I looked at it, and in their grades right now, Andrew Luck is the 47th quarterback on their list.
That high?
That high. Absolutely that high. So it'll be interesting. It'll be an interesting thing to see how going forward. So, I mean, I guess, Kyle, my next question kind of go on that. Like, what do you see as being Andrew's struggles so far this season? Like, where do you see it stemming from?
I mean, there's a variety of things. He's had, some poor decision making, or not necessarily poor, but slow decision making. I think was his biggest fault over the first couple of weeks. And he's been kind of erratic in how he reads defenses. I mean, even going back to last year, when he was phenomenal last year. He threw 40 touchdowns, he led the league. But he did. I mean, at times when the Colts offense struggled, when he struggled, a lot of times you could go back to some of those pre-snap reads, and there were definitely some things he could improve on. So I think there's definitely an area there where Luck is not as good as he might be hyped up to be. And just because a lot of times you'll see beat writers compare him to guys like Peyton Manning, and the whole time he's been in the league, you see him, he's so smart, he sees things that nobody else sees, blah, 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 and he is really smart, he's really good. He's also a fourth-year quarterback. I mean, he that's still, like, you look back at what Peyton Manning was in his 4th year, and he was further ahead than Andrew Luck is, he really was, but he wasn't anywhere near where he was in his prime, especially in terms of reading defenses. I mean, there's a reason he struggled so much against the Patriots early on in his career. So, yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Sorry, this idea that Luck is like a football savant, like on Peyton Manning's level intellectually as a quarterback, kind of stems back to, obviously he's from Stanford, so everyone he thinks he's smart. He And he's always been hyped up like that. If you ask any of his old college coaches, of course, they're going to talk about that. But I recall a lot of the biggest praise that he got from his coaches in college was in his calling run plays, audibling on 2 run plays, and knowing when to do that correctly, not necessarily in the passing game so much. And that's where we've seen him struggle mostly this year. So that's always been kind of, I guess we can use the word narrative appropriately here about Andrew. I don't think he's like necessarily behind where you'd think a fourth-year player would be, but he's not. He's obviously not that genius level that a lot of people thought he was.
Yeah, and I mean, there's lots of other issues here with this offense too. But if we're just talking about where Luck has struggled over the first few weeks, I think that's an area where he would probably say too that that's an area where they need to improve going forward. He was inaccurate and stuff too, but some of that stuff is just kind of his tendencies to happen when they start snowballing.
Do you think it's fair to maybe start to reevaluate the comparisons with Luck and Peyton and other NFL quarterbacks? Because I don't necessarily think he's as calculating as Peyton Manning or even Tom Brady is. I mean, when he comes down to it at his core, he's more Ben Roethlisberger, Ben Favre than he is those other guys. In my opinion, I mean, he's more willing to take those gambles than. I mean, Peyton Manning made a lot of really good throws, and he made some throws that you couldn't imagine anyone else making in his career. But I feel like sometimes Luck tries to just Brett Favre it out there sometimes, and I mean, and they are ugly when they happen because that's just the nature of those throws. But kind of shifting gears, kind of from that real quick. And I'll let these guys ask some questions here in a second. But my last question for right now is, what do you think of the season so far? What's been the most surprising thing to you about the season so far?
I mean, Matt Hasselbeck, I'll bag on the guy because he's a backup quarterback and everything. But I mean, if you are trying to compare Hasselbeck to Luck or whatever, or you look at Hasselbeck's actual numbers and actual performance and say, wow, he was really good. I mean, I'm gonna all right, hold on. Pump the brakes. But for a backup quarterback, for him to have that offense rolling pretty consistently against Houston on Thursday, that was easily the most surprising thing for me. And I think a big part of it is Houston is a lot worse than we thought they were going to be. But still, for Hasselbeck to actually be able to lead that team up and down the field when they needed to, and I mean even against the Jaguars too, even though that game was terrible. That's been by far the most surprising thing. Everything else has been kind of, you could kind of see everything else coming to some extent, but Hasselbeck actually being able to play in those stints where they needed him to, I mean, I was dead wrong on that one.
Yeah. Especially given the whole preseason, we were talking for some reason about should we fire Grigson because they can't find a good backup quarterback. Like Hasselbeck was going to be the downfall of the Colts somehow, and then somehow he's the best quarterback we got. I'm all aboard the bandwagon. I'm starting Hasselbeck next week and the rest of the season.
Colts still have the best quarterback in the AFC South. Still better than Ruff.
Either way, yeah. 1 and 2, I guess. I guess this is kind of an interesting comment, kind of off of what you had just said, Kyle. Do you think that? I mean, they obviously have changed the offense a little bit to suit Matt Hasselbeck. Do you think when Andrew comes back that they're going to keep that offense, or do you think that they're just going to start throwing it right back down the field?
I think they're going to keep elements of the offense. I think you look at especially what Pagano said over the last week or so about wanting to keep a lot of those elements of just quick passing and balance and running the ball and stuff like that. I think now that they've had some success with Hasselbeck, they're going to try and keep some of those elements, but there's no way they're going to keep the exact same game plan. I mean, you've got Andrew Luck. You've got to let him throw the ball down the field a little bit, even with that offensive line. And don't get me wrong, yes, the Colts won those 2 games with Hasselbeck. I don't know that they do that against any other teams in the league other than the Jaguars and Texans. So, the Colts aren't in a good state. That hasn't changed. They just so happen to play probably the 2 worst teams in the league. Or at least 2 bottom 5 teams in the league in that exact stretch where they needed their backup quarterback to step up. So I was wrong on Hasselbeck, but the Colts still aren't in a good state if Andrew Luck can't keep playing, and if Andrew Luck can't play at his standards, not Matt Hasselbeck's standards.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's all true. I don't really have anything to go off that. That was probably perfect. So I'll go with we'll start this little round table here with James. James, what do you got for Kyle?
So I was going to ask you about. We know it's coming. There's going to be at least a coaching change, if not GM change too. Is there any specific philosophy or type of coach that you'd kind of be looking for besides Jim Harbaugh, the dream? Any would you prefer offense, defense?
I mean,
go
for
get 'em
me, it's I don't even know if it's a specific type of coach, but I want this team to develop Andrew Luck. I mean, that's to me, that's the only thing. I want the team to develop Andrew Luck, and I want them to be better prepared for big games. Like this team, Pagano has done a lot of good things. And so anybody who just says Pagano's a terrible coach, get rid of him, blah blah blah. It's like, okay. Anyone who says Ron Grigson's a terrible GM, get rid of him, blah blah blah. Okay. Like there's two sides to both of those coins, but they've been awful at preparing for big games. Like they've come out flat in pretty much every big game since 2013. I mean, 2013 they came out and beat the Seahawks and 49ers and the Broncos, and since then it's been a dud every time they play a team that they don't match up well against. Like
even
nothing.
those they come out flat to start too.
Yeah, so it's like I want to see a coach that can prepare well and make some adjustments in game, which the Colts have done okay in. But the big things are, those are the two big things for me. Is I want to see a team that can develop Luck and develop, Luck into a top 5 quarterback, because I think that's the only way the Colts are a contender for, the long majority of the time, is if Luck's top 5 quarterback. And I want them to be better prepared. So, I mean, anything else is kind of, gravy. It's just, they can make work kind of whatever kind of off or whatever kind of coach they get from there. They need more talent on the defense, I think. They need a coach and they need a coach that can develop offensive linemen. I don't know. There's a lot of different things we could go into there, but those would be my two big things if you're going to look at making coaching changes. It would be you've got to make developing Luck the priority, and then preparation.
Okay, kind of a similar vein. If you're so we've known. I think that the plan the whole time with Andrew and the Colts with Grigson and Pagano is like they really. I mean, the first year. I think I was talking about this last time, but that first year it was build the monster. Build a monster. We're rebuilding. I mean, I guess they never said rebuilding, but that's what they were doing. And then they won 11 games, and then it was like, well, shit. Maybe it's not time. I mean, maybe we can do something here. Maybe we can do that. And then because I really believe, like deep down, Grigson is one of those, like, we need to get players and develop them and keep them kind of Ted Thompson-esque. But like when Irsay kind of gave the commandment of, we won 11 games in our first year in a rebuild. He went for the Landrys and the Sherrillis's and all that kind of stuff, and they really just stopped building the monster, and they started to patch the the gremlin, and then the gremlins the gremlin without armor is what we're seeing now. It's just an ugly little thing after midnight. It's running around creating mischief. So I mean,
that's something I wanted to mention, because it's almost when we're gonna go through this whole thing of whether we should be defending Ryan Grigson or should be opposing him, one of the things you have to kind of take in place is that he did have pressure from Irsay, from Pagano, when they did when they won 11 games in his first year. Well, do they keep rebuilding? Is that what you call it? It's almost unfair to him to win 11 games in that first year, because those expectations were so far from reality. So you have to wonder, was that even in his plan to do what they did do with all those free agent signings?
Well, and he has pressure on himself too. I mean, I don't think it's all external pressure. You have a team that goes, 11-5 and gets in the playoffs. You have that pressure. All right, we have a team that can go to the playoffs. Let's see what we can do building it. I mean, going 11-5 was, and I think we've all probably seen or heard this or said this ourselves before. Going 11-5 that first year was the worst thing that could have happened to this team for the long term. They lost that draft position. You end up drafting in the 20s for the next 4 years instead of drafting, in the top 10 or even top 15 for a year or two, then your schedule gets harder too. So all that going 11-5 that first year was great. It was an awesome year to be a fan, but for the long term of the franchise, it was really just about the worst thing that it could possibly happen. And it put both Grigson and Pagano in terrible situations, because Grigson now, like I said, it's harder to build a team from that position. But also for Pagano, you come back and you have to fill these shoes of Arians, who did this great job of coaching this team that really didn't have very much talent to the playoffs. And now you have these expectations you have to meet every year. Otherwise, you're done.
Yeah, I mean, that is another thing too. I mean, we went 11-5 that first year, and it was a magical season. You know, the win over Green Bay, I was there. I'll never, ever forget that. I'll never forget that. I mean, the win over Detroit, again, nothing. I mean, I'll never. And by the way, Risden, I know you're not listening to this, but yes, this did happen. We came back and we beat you. And will you please get over it? It's time. It really is time. But anyways, I mean, just those victories, those little comeback from behinds, they're magical, and they happen with Arians. And then we go back to Pagano, and it was really interesting to see, even in that first playoff game, the momentum with coaching and decision making completely changed, because if you remember 2012, that first wild card game that we went to,
the Ravens.
There was the Ravens. There was just bad coaching. And that was, no offense, Pagano, you're a great guy, but I mean that was Pagano's first game back, and it was exactly what you would imagine from a coach who had coached, 4 games as a head coach, and then all of a sudden he's in the playoffs coaching. And so there was still a whole lot of learning that had to happen again, and then we went 11-5 again and again. So it's just I mean, and a lot of that is riding on the coattails of how bad this division is. We're gonna make the playoffs at 9-7. If we go 9-7 this year, we're still in the playoffs. I hope everyone listening to that understands this. If we go
5 games.
Yeah. If we go 8-8, we still might make the playoffs.
Resting starters.
Yeah. I mean,
they're gonna go 6-0 in the division and still go 8-8 and win the division by 2 games. It's happening. I don't see this not happening in any way unless they, somehow Andrew Luck just turns into that top 5 quarterback.
And I mean, but you never know. I mean, what we've seen so far, probably not with Andrew, but I mean, he's had slow starts every year. And being hurt doesn't help that at all. So we'll have to see if he can get into a rhythm going down the stretch. So I'm going to switch over to Brian here. Brian, you got a question for Kyle?
Yeah. Well, with upstate New York national broadcasting, haven't been able to see a lot of the actual Colts games. I've been trying to do what I can on the film rewind, but I'm trying to figure out what's going on with the inside linebacker core right now. We've talked a little bit. DeQuell played very poor last year, and he's kind of picking it up this year. We kind of know what to expect with Jarrell Freeman, but we don't know exactly what he should be in this role. And then I know the last couple games we've seen C.O. Moore come in. I've seen Nate Irving come up on the stat sheet. So I'm trying to figure out what we're doing with this inside linebacker core.
We're struggling. I mean, that's like the inside linebackers just aren't talented. I mean, no offense. Again, this is all relative. You're better than me. Don't come to my house. But comparative to, and the NFL, to be fair, the NFL kind of has a shortage of inside linebackers, and safeties, kind of that whole middle of the defense thing. Same places the Colts struggle. There's a shortage in the league, but the Colts, DeQuell Jackson is what he is. He's okay against the run if the defensive line is doing its job. Jarrell Freeman, he's kind of he can have spurts in both pass defense and run, but again, not consistent enough really for what you want as a starter. And those backups, I don't know what's going on with Moore. He's not that good from what I've seen. I mean, we saw what he did, a few years ago in Oakland, but he's either just having a hard time grasping the playbook. He's also, when he's in pass coverage, he is completely lost. I don't know what he's doing on the field in pass coverage. Irving just had the 1 game, so it's tough really to know what we're going to get from him. There's some potential there, especially on the run side of the ball, but they need, desperately need talent there. If there's one, the most valid criticism that I've seen of Grigson is that he hasn't developed the pass rush well enough, and that they just haven't put in the resources at inside linebacker. There's nothing there. They signed DeQuell Jackson, but everybody who had paid attention knew DeQuell Jackson was not going to be any kind of fix. So really, that's the only move they've made of substance at linebacker. I mean, they got lucky. Terrell Freeman was as good as he was coming out of the CFL, or they would be. I mean, they'd be playing Kelvin Shepherd.
Mm-hmm. Ooh. Blast from the past. We were just kind of talking about that earlier. Yeah, I mean, Brian, I mean, what do you think about that, Brian?
I mean, I don't know a lot about Seal Moore. That's the thing. I mean, I'm hoping we can find some role for him. I think I've always been a little higher on DeQuell Jackson. I think most people have, mostly because I think he's better against the run than most people give him credit for, although he can't cover at all. So, I mean, when you put him in the right role, I think he's successful, but that's not the point of a linebacker nowadays. You can't just be one-dimensional. So that's why, I mean, like Garrett said, Clayton Gathers is kind of taking up that role too. So if you even want to throw a fifth guy in that rotation, but none of them show the consistency that they need to. None of them show that two-dimensional type of aspect that they need to be an inside linebacker.
You know, the problem with that is that, you know, you have, okay, well, we've got you know, Clayton Gathers. He's going to come in. He's going to come on the field and passing snaps for DeQuell Jackson. That'll be fine. It's like, all right, that's great when you're playing Jacksonville, but when you're going up against Tom Brady and you've got DeQuell Jackson in for a run snap, whatever that means, he's gonna audible out of it. He's gonna get Gronkowski singled up on him, and we're all gonna die. Like, it's just I mean, you go up against a good quarterback who can adjust, and the Colts don't have enough flexibility to make up for it.
No, yeah, and I mean, kind of staying with the linebackers. I mean, and it's not like they're getting any help at all from the outside linebackers. I think Walden does what Walden gets paid for, and his contract maybe did not look as good as it should have when it was first signed. But for doing what he is doing for $4 million a year, I mean, that's totally an okay contract in my book, really. Because you're not looking at him as a liability on the field. But kind of what's been your kind of takeaways on these other linebackers? Like, what do you see from the pass rushers? I mean, besides nothing. Like, do you see any glimmer of hope for the season? Like,
I mean, I think there's some hope in that Robert Mathis still looks good. I mean, he still kind of looks like Robert Mathis, and so you can get some flashes from him here and there, which is helpful. Trent Cole, we've seen a little bit out of, but the thing about the pass rushers is that it's like if you get great coverage, then these pass rushers, Trent Cole and Robert Mathis, might be able to get there. But that's your optimum level, is if you get great coverage and they have a chance at getting there. But if you don't have good coverage, then they just don't have anybody who has that, like, flash in the pan, quick penetration. Whether it's just beating a guy off the edge really quick, getting a quick inside move, like all of these guys, they're just slow developing on that pass rush. Even the veteran guys, the wily, Cole and Mathis, who have that background, at this point their athleticism isn't there, so that those quick plays just don't come. So what they have to do is blitz. I mean, that's the only thing they can do is blitz, and that's really the only way they can get that quick pressure. Otherwise, they're relying on a secondary that is not deep at all to have perfect pass coverage for the first 2 seconds. It's just not always going to happen.
Do you think they're missing that element of pass rush from the defensive line? Like Henry Anderson, Perry, Langford, everyone's played great with the run, and okay with in the pass rush regard. They're not asking them to do that really, and they really shouldn't. But do you think that they're missing the Corey Redding influence on the pass rush side?
I mean, I could see where you were coming from, but to me, it's really not that at all. Like, you've got, like, Anderson. I think these guys, especially Anderson, they provide enough of a push in pass rush that the pocket isn't perfect, and quarterbacks don't have a ton of room to step up into it. But there's nothing coming from the edge, and so I think that's a way bigger gap to fill right now, is that edge rusher, that premier edge rush guy. And in the past, I would say the defensive line. But I think Anderson gives them a guy there that's disruptive enough. I think Perry shows enough here and there. Langford even a little bit here and there. That interior it just can't be. It has to be a little bit messy in the interior. But your pass rush, your premier pass rush, has to come from the edge, and they just don't have anybody really that can provide that consistently.
Yeah, I mean, and we were hoping Newsome would be there. Yeah, but we'll just. I think we beat up Newsom enough on this podcast. We had a whole segment dedicated to him not being there, and we've talked about him every week. But so I'm just gonna throw it out to Garrett. Garrett, what do you got for Kyle?
I'll comment on what you guys were talking about real quick. I think it's interesting. They've approached linebacker kind of the same way they've approached safety over the last couple of years, except I think the results have been very different. Obviously, Adams and even to an extent Lowry have come in and they've done some pretty good things that we weren't really expecting them to do at this stage of their career, whereas guys like DeQuell have been as good or worse than what little we were expecting of them. But then they had a chance to invest some draft resources in linebackers this year early on. You know, guys like Eric Hendricks and stuff were available. I guess they didn't seem to like what talent the draft had to offer at that position because they chose to wait until Herrera in the 5th or 6th round to actually pick a linebacker. But then they got another chance at a guy that we know they liked from recent years, C.O. Moore. I don't think they were expecting a chance to get him. They got Nate Irving much earlier in free agency, and then they got Geathers too, who they are bringing down from the safety position. And so, I mean, I'm still waiting to see some really some above-average production from all of those guys, and you can kind of make your own excuses for each one of them. CO is still very new to this organization, to this defense. Irving is also new, and he's coming off an injury. And Geathers is obviously just still a rookie, so I'm going to be more patient with them. I think hopefully one of them should be getting the lion's share of the snaps by the end of the season. I think that would be ideal if one of them started to show some real quality snaps by then. Until then, I'm just going to be more patient. And I like what Kyle said about the defensive line because you do want to get some push from there, but you're also not going to, even if you've got elite guys on that defensive line, those aren't going to be your sack artists most of the time. Like, I mean, if you look at the guys who get the most sacks in the league, they're edge players, all of them, pretty much regardless of scheme. And then you've got, exceptions like the Watts and the Atkins and stuff. But, yeah, that real production has to come from the edge. You need guys to clean up messy piles and actually bring down the quarterback. And right now they don't really have anyone on the defense who is really athletically capable enough of getting there in time. Newsom's probably the best edge, or at least most athletic, fastest edge guy they have right now, but he's still very raw. We still don't like really what we've seen from him. And then I'm just trying to think of the best athletes they have on this defense right now, and I think Anderson and Vontae and I guess C.O. Moore are probably the three guys who really stand out as above-average athletes on this defense right now. And really, when you just in a vacuum, when you've only got three guys that really stand out athletically, your unit is probably just not going to produce the way you want it to. And that's what kind of makes the Colts such an interesting case study from the last few years, is that they're this team that didn't have, like we were talking about with their draft position, they drafted very early in the first round once, and then they didn't have any real opportunity at any young core players in the following drafts. So they've been this team with a really weak core, an experienced core, and then they've gone through this almost historically weak division, and they've rode that to several division titles, and it looks like they're going to do that again. And we just haven't really seen a team with that kind of success with that little talent and without what I would call a high level of coaching. So maybe that was just unsustainable. That's what I'm starting to wonder. Maybe the Colts model from recent years just was bound to crash, and starting the season against teams with a lot of talent, with a lot of strong defensive talent, like Buffalo and New York, just kind of broke the camel's back, or Luck's arm in this case. What do you think about my rant, Kyle?
I mean, I think the unsustainability thing is dead on. I mean, even before the Gregson Pagano era, whatever, you look back at Polian and Manning, the reason that the Colts had the number one pick in 2012 was because they had drafted so late for so long that that team, when Manning goes down, there's nothing left. It was a team that had some talent, but it was built all around Manning because that's really all you could do when you're drafting in the late 20s every year. So, I mean, unless you are the Patriots and you have Bill Belichick, like we can't win every year. It's just it doesn't work. So, I mean, I think that was a really good point, and I think too, you look at the athletes on the line, and a lot of times you hear like, okay, well, why can't we build a team like Denver? Like, look at their defense, and they also have all this talent on offense. Like, why can't you do both? Well, Denver has Von Miller on one side, right? You go out and you sign a guy like DeMarcus Ware. The big difference between Denver signing DeMarcus Ware and the Colts signing Trent Cole. I mean, one, DeMarcus Ware is a little more left, but also the big thing is you've got Von Miller on the other side. I mean, like you cannot put into words how impactful it is to have more than one, especially one really elite pass rusher, and then having another good one to go alongside it. You look back at what the Colts did with Robert Mathis and Dwight Freeney all those years. I mean, having two guys just it explodes your pass rush. I mean, it's that exponential curve. So they have to have, and Von Miller was one of those top 5 picks. So you've got this like super athletic, super impactful guy, top 10 pick. I mean, and the Colts don't have that. The Colts got Dwight Freeney as a top 15 pick back in the day, and were able to luck out and get Robert Mathis in the 5th round. But again, you have to have those cornerstone guys, and then you can luck out with the secondary guys. Right now, the Colts don't have the cornerstone guys, so they're hoping they can luck out with a cornerstone guy in some late pick, and that's, like you said, that's the unsustainable thing.
Yeah. I mean that's total fair criticism, and I mean I think it's something like kind of going off what you had said, Garrett. It's they, and kind of going off what I had said earlier. Like when we went 11-5, we kind of were like we hadn't put that, besides Luck, who is the cornerstone of the team, we hadn't put any other foundation around him, and then we're drafting 20, whatever Warner pick was, 24, 23. We're drafting from 24, 23, and the only person who looked decent, I guess, was Bjorn, and we all know how that's turned out. Not well. He's basically practice squad level player, just kind of riding the roster, play special teams, but. It's interesting, and something that you had said, Kyle, about how we're not the Patriots when it comes to that. Like, it's what you said. It is a testament. Like, this kind of just goes off. The whole this is me turning the Colts fan off and turning on football fan. Bill Belichick is a mastermind, amazing coach, amazing GM. What he's been able to do to build that team from the bottom of the draft every single year is just. It's pretty incredible. I mean he misses a lot, and that's the thing that I don't think people realize is that all the GMs really miss a lot. Like we went back a couple of weeks ago and we were looking at Ozzie Newsome's recent draft record. It doesn't look so good. You look at it, it doesn't look so good. But they're also continually drafting near the bottom, and it is hard to pick players from there. So while we're on the topic of the Patriots, Kyle,
hey, Grant, real quick before you move on. Speaking of draft records, go to the Seahawks, right? The Seahawks, who are these great drafters usually from 2013 on, which is right, that's when the Colts drafts have struggled. The Colts have, I think by far, you look at the Colts draft capital and what they've gotten in return, it's so much better. I mean, than even the Seahawks, and the Seahawks are they're like the pinnacle right now.
Dude, just imagine that team if they had drafted Moncrief or something, and just one little difference.
Instead of Paul Richardson.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I rant about this probably once a week in the DMs.
Yeah.
I love John Schneider. He's a super good GM, but I mean, all we hear about is every time there's some bad player, like, oh, maybe Grigson will trade a first round for him. Like, this dude just traded a first round pick for Jimmy Graham and a first, third, and seventh for Percy Harvin, and they've got like 12 catches combined.
Yeah, the Percy Harvin trade was, I mean, they got a Super Bowl kind of out of it because he was really good in that Super Bowl. But outside of that, it was way worse than Trent Richardson trade. Like, Percy Harvin was a cancer, and he did nothing on the field. Like, there's
$25 million guaranteed. Yeah. $25 million too.
And then they let Tate go because they had the Harvin, who they thought was going to be their guy, and Tate turned out to be much better.
Yep.
Don't know who among us could have predicted that, but
I could have. So I guess we'll go back to where I was going there earlier. So tell us, Kyle, what do the Colts need to do to win on Sunday?
This is timed very well because I was right before this podcast was in the middle of writing an article for Bleacher Report tomorrow on the matchups that the Colts have to win tomorrow. So here, let me pull this up.
Plug.
BleacherReport.com, brought to you by DraftKings. I don't know if I'm authorized to say that. Probably not. Oh well.
DraftKings doesn't care, I'm sure.
So, I mean, I've got like 5 things on here. I'll make them really quick, but I mean, the first matchup for me is between Pep Hamilton and Andrew Luck. Like, they just have to get it figured out on the offense. And this isn't even a like, what can Bill Belichick do and how do we counter that? No, just figure out what you can do, because the difference between what they did those first 2 games and then what they did at the end of the Titans game and then in the next 2 games combined, success obviously is a lot different. Titans game, they were able to get some long passing going. The last two games, they've been able to move with the short, quick game and some balance in the run game. They have to figure out their identity on offense. So that's the first thing they've got to do. The second one, I don't know how. I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe Darius Butler can drink some of Bugs Bunny's like special water juice, whatever that was in Space Jam. We know what it was, Bugs Bunny. We got you. But he's got to stop Julian Edelman. Like, they're going to play man-to-man. If their corners are healthy, they're going to play man-to-man. It's going to be Butler's job to stop Edelman. If he does what he did kind of against Welker when the Colts beat the Broncos a couple years ago in Indy, like Garrett just wrote, we need 2013 Butler. And that's exactly what they need against Edelman, because Brady, we know how much Brady loves him over the middle, and the Colts are terrible at stopping things over the middle in general. So Butler's got to stop Edelman. The linebackers against those running backs is a huge matchup, especially Dion Lewis. Blunt, we all know Blunt killed him in the playoffs, blah, blah, blah. I think the Colts' defensive line is a little better, although the big issue is linebackers still in the run game. But Dion Lewis is just like a terror to me against these Colts linebackers.
Oh, it's going to be bad.
He's been so good running the ball and catching the ball, just elusive. Sees the field pretty well. The Colts, I don't know what they're going to do. Again, I don't know how the Colts are winning these matchups, but these are the matchups they have to win.
Maybe they shouldn't have cut Dion Lewis a couple years ago. But go ahead and go on.
No, I saw that the other day. I was like, wait, they had Dion Lewis in camp?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, funny story from Albany. Dion Lewis went to high school like 10, 15 minutes from me. He absolutely tore it up at Albany High, and then after like his sophomore year of high school, he transferred because he was just too good for everyone. He transferred like some major private school.
Oh man, it's gonna be a bloodbath.
I don't understand how some of these guys just are nothing for the first 3 years, and they just bounce around, and then all of a sudden they look like this. Yeah,
yep.
I mean, right?
It is.
Speaking of which, there's the big matchup, right? Pagano versus Belichick, which there's no way Pagano wins that matchup. But if he can at least come up with a couple in-game adjustments that work, if they can come to the game somewhat prepared, rather than just getting steamrolled in the coaching matchup like they have the last few games, they'll have a much better shot. And then the last matchup is pretty much the entire Colts defense against the bouncer, Rob Gronkowski, because there's no like single guy. It's not like, oh, maybe Clayton Geathers can match up. No, he can't.
No.
Like, maybe they can play zone. Like, okay, great, yeah, just play zone against Tom Brady all game. That'll work. No, like there's no single thing they can do against Gronk. But if they get everybody, maybe they like just bring everybody at the line of scrimmage and just don't let them leave the line. I don't know. There's nothing they can do. But that's the only other thing like I've got in terms of matchups.
Yeah, Fleener covering Gronk, that might be the most smart thing, or the smartest thing I've heard. I mean, athlete on athlete, pass catching tight end on
or swoop
dumpster.
Nobody's catching balls in
catching
balls in traffic if Fleener's playing.
Man, what a good point. And I just want to say, as you're going off your list, right? I'm just starting to get sadder and sadder.
I know.
Like, you're like, oh, well, first of all, let's talk about Pep and Andrew. And I was like, well, that's a good point. And then you're like, Edelman. And I'm like, I started thinking to myself, I'm like, man, I always forget about Edelman, but he's like really, really, really good. Like, he is a fantastic slot receiver.
He's better than Welker.
He's had like 20 PPR points at fantasy every freaking week, and I don't think I have him in any leagues. But he's just a monster.
Dude, I remember
that offense.
I remember like watching a behind-the-scenes Patriots thing like from a couple years ago, and I think it was Edelman's rookie year, and he was just like this practice squad guy returning punts, and Bill is talking to Wes on the sideline. Is like, "Oh, dude, he's gonna take your job."
And he did, because he's like way better than Wes, without the concussions. So
Way better.
So I mean, so depressing me aside, I think you're absolutely right. It's just there's no I'm gonna stutter here for a second because I'm trying to find the words. There are no words that can really describe how lost I already feel about this game. I mean, it's in my mind we're already 3-3, and we're getting ready to play the Saints at home, the Saints. And but I hate to say that, but I will watch every second of the game, and then I'll watch it again, even in slower motion, in the all 22. So it's like, you get stabbed once, and then all of a sudden they're slowly stabbing you as you watch each play twice or 4 or 5 times as you're trying to find the right vine. Well, I guess not anymore. But actually, they did delete some of my vines. It's true.
How did they find them?
I don't know. My vines between May and October, they're gone.
Somebody's snitching. Someone's snitching to Goodell.
Yeah.
I looked at mine.
Brian.
Yeah. It's Brian. He's trying to get editor points. So I'm trying to think of. Okay. So here's a fun exercise that we've done multiple times, and we will do once again. We're past the quarter of the season. We're gonna do the thing where we're all gonna talk about draft needs. I know it's way too early to talk about it, but so Kyle, if we were drafting tomorrow, and you had your choice of the best player available, whatever you want to call it, at a position, what position are you drafting right now?
Probably outside linebacker, just because I think pass rush is a bigger. It has a higher correlation to victory than, say, inside linebacker. I think inside linebacker is really close on that, and I'm right with you, James. But like inside linebacker is close just because they have so little talent there. But outside linebacker I think is just more important in terms of that edge pass rush. So if they could have an elite guy there, I would take that over anything.
James?
That's that's the same thing. Every week it's going to be that. Not just is it pretty much the most important position that they need, it's most important position on defense probably, and it's going to be the one that's the hardest to get in the later rounds. Like you can find a good middle linebacker in the 3rd round. You can find, a good cornerback in the 2nd round. You can find good guys everywhere, but it's a lot harder to get a athletic, really good top pass rusher picking, 45th or something, whatever it's going to be.
Garrett?
I agree. Yeah, it is hard. I think if you're going to invest your highest draft capital in any one position on this defense and you want it to correspond directly to wins, it's definitely edge rusher. We were talking about the importance of that compared to even if you have an improved defensive line, you still need a guy to actually knock the quarterback down. And it turns, elite guys into Ryan Malletts when you have a good pass rush. I wouldn't be mad if they drafted a good inside linebacker too, but it would have to be a guy who's versatile and not just what I would consider one-dimensional player, because I think like James said, you could get those guys in the 3rd round or so. And I think just even a one-dimensional linebacker, if it was a really strong dimension, could make this defense significantly better. Strength in that inside linebacker core right now is maybe Freeman's ability to cover. I don't consider DeQuell, although he has been actually better this year, I have to give him credit for that. I don't consider him to be a great run stopper. And even if maybe Nate Irving comes along and develops into just a guy that can plug the run, that would be helpful. But yeah, edge rusher it's been this defense's biggest problem ever since we lost Mathis, and it was a need anyways back then because Mathis is old. So probably time.
Brian, you're up.
I'll play devil's advocate, I guess, since everyone chose outside linebacker. Maybe this is because I don't like any of the edge rushers this year. They're all way too skinny. But nonetheless, I'll go cornerback because I love press cornerbacks because that's always my preferred philosophy of defense. And as injuries showed that one cornerback isn't really enough. I mean, we can talk about the Seahawks, but when they were good, it's because they had 4 really, really good cornerbacks that fit in their scheme. And we could say Toller fits well in our scheme. We could say Butler fits good in our scheme. But when they're going down and people don't even know who are starting and are going against top-tier wide receivers, it's a problem. So just like I said, to play devil's advocate, I'll say like a really good press corner round 1, go against Vontae Davis. We know he locks up one side of the field usually by himself. And another point to make is when you have really good press corners, it gets your outside linebackers who are older, they don't have the speed, but when they have the experience and know how to get to the quarterback without their speed, and the quarterback holds the ball for an extra half a second or a second, that can make a difference. And especially even when they do come around the edge and they're still not getting to the quarterback, if that forces him to step up into the pocket, and we have guys like Henry Anderson and Kendall Langford who are improving week by week by week, then I don't know. That's always my recipe. Is I always like to, if it's not their outside linebacker, maybe you're reaching for a guy, what can make the outside linebacker position better if you attack another need on the defense? And I think right now that biggest need, although maybe inside linebacker with the value that you're talking about, I think if you get a really good round 1 corner, that helps his defense out maybe more than any other position.
And the three of you had, probably what I would say is probably the correct answer, in that, that extreme hypothetical where everything goes right. But we're looking, once again, like we had said earlier, no matter what really happens, we go 8-8, 7-9 even, we're still winning the division, and so we're still picking in the 20s. And realistically, what I think what we're really going to see, I mean, just looking at, I haven't really got into the draft, each prospect, so I don't know which groups are strong or not. But what I do know is that it is hard to keep. The offense that we want to try and run is hard to run with this offensive line, especially the deep developing stuff, which is okay, which is fine. But we don't have the offensive line to run it, and if we're gonna pay Andrew $25 million, I know you can find $25 million a year. We're gonna have to start maybe. I know what Kyle's fun little draft capital, free agent capital thing, said, we have spent a lot on the offensive line, which is true, and I'm not saying that Grigson hasn't done anything to address it. He's definitely thrown money and picks at it, but here's the thing, it's still awful. It's really bad. But here's the thing, Colts fans, if you're not aware, offensive lines across the NFL really suck. Some of them are really bad. We're in that group, but we're not alone. So don't let people really bad. Seahawks, another good example. Talk about Seahawks. They're really, really good. They're really, really good. Offensive line is awful. It's really bad.
The Jaguars spent all their money in free agency, like guys like Parnell. Their center, I forgot who they had. Brandon Linder is injured, so Jags are kind of also in that group too.
Yeah, well, they're in that group too, and they spent picks on Jockle. AJ Cann was a 3rd rounder. Parnell was expensive. Wisniewski was actually a pretty cheap deal, but they still did go out and go for him. So if you can find the right one, if you can find a guy who's going to be good for 10 years at pick 20 or 22 or whatever, I think that's the pick. It's a safe pick, and look, it did work out. Those are all examples we just gave of how it didn't work out, but there are examples of how it did work out. Prime 49ers offensive line from a few years ago was really, really good with Staley and Ayupati and those guys. Cowboys offensive line, obviously they've thrown some heavy draft capital there. First rounders on Martin and Frederick. So I mean, it's not an outlandish thing. And if they can find the right guy who could start for 5, 6, 7, 10 years and be good, that'll be really good in the long run for our quarterback and the offense as a whole. So
I will say this real quick, Grant.
Yeah.
I'm still with Jay and Garrett in terms of outside linebacker being the biggest need. But if we're picking, if the Colts are picking in those low mid-20s, I think cornerback and offensive line are two positions that are big needs, but also you can usually find decent value on those positions there in terms of contributing early too. You look at guys like Trufant, Rhodes, who have come in and developed really quickly into being really good players in the outside and affected their defenses. You look at offensive line. You look at a guy where was Long drafted? Kyle Long was drafted. Wasn't he not like 19?
It was around 17 to 21.
That's what I thought. So he was a guy he was in there. A guy like Larry Warford came in and was a stud his rookie year, kind of early second round. So there's especially if you can get a guy. Was he third round?
Yeah, he was.
So you can get a guy. I think the thing with the pass rushers is those elite athletes go so early. So if you are picking in the 20s, Garrett says Newhort too. You can get value there in the late first even to the early third in offensive linemen. So offensive linemen, cornerbacks, I think they can, if they're picking in the 20s, I think that's an area where that could definitely kind of pan out in those two positions.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. I guess that was the whole point of my argument is that the value is there, and then that the elite pass rushers aren't going to be there unless they smoke weed. So I mean Shane Ray. No matter what you want to say of Shane Ray, he was still pretty athletic. But he definitely say what?
Randy Gregory.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Same with those guys. Extremely athletic. But the only reason that they lasted as long as they did is because they messed up at school. So now what we're going to do is kind of close this out. I asked our audience for some questions for you, and we're just going to kind of go through a few of these, and then that'll kind of be the end of the podcast today. So this is a cool one from Scotty Keatle. I'm going to do the first part, not the second part of this question. Can you rank the Colts wide receivers from best to worst when the play breaks down?
Oh, I saw that question, and I really like it. Mostly because it's really easy to answer. It's pretty much T.Y. and nobody else. If you look at Luck getting outside the pocket, T.Y. is really good at scrambling and scrambling towards him, getting towards Andrew Luck, giving him a guy that's coming to him, making him an easier throw. Or at least coming to his side of the field. The other wide receivers, especially early on in this season, you look at some of Luck's picks, like that one against Tennessee when he got outside the pocket and just kind of threw it up to the outside, trying to get it to Hilton, moving to him. None of the other receivers are doing anything. They're just watching it happen. And I think a guy like Fleener sometimes will try and do some stuff outside of the norm just because he and Luck have that chemistry. But pretty much, T.Y. tries to do stuff once the play breaks down, but everybody else, they're kind of on the same level for me. I just really don't ever notice them doing anything.
Very cool. Brent, I know you're listening. Your question was mean, and so I'm going to skip it. But thank you for listening, as you always do, Brent.
You're the best, Brent.
Shout out to the best Twitter, the second best Twitter.
I still like you, Brent.
Yeah. Colts comments. With Joe Reitz now starting at tackle, would you officially consider him to be free?
Considering how well he's playing, I would. I was kind of frustrated that they wouldn't move him back to guard, where I love him, but man, he's playing so well, and as long as he's playing, that's the thing for me. He is freed, and I could not be happier. If I was any happier, I would be Ben Gundy.
Yeah. Well, I don't think anyone gets as fired up about O-line than Ben Gundy. So we already kind of talked about this one. Here's a good one. Why didn't you personally help draft more protection for Luck?
Right, I've gotten a lot of kind of blowback, especially those first 2 weeks when the Colts, started 0-2, about the offseason and just saying that the Colts offensive line wasn't as big of a need as those defensive line, not defensive line, as those defensive positions, especially things like linebacker and even saying that wide receiver was a need at the time, as it was. But I think people still don't quite understand how much the offensive system and Andrew Luck's styles hurt the offensive line, and the opponent hurt the offensive line in those first 2 weeks. Like, it was just a perfect storm for poor offensive line play. And the fact that the offensive line, the biggest issue has been their ability to pick up the blitz, their communication issues, more than them just getting manhandled every play. Like, those first two games, playing the Bills and the Jets, like, they just could not, like, there's free rushers coming everywhere because them and the running backs, because you've got Josh Robinson and Tyler Varga in there half the time trying to pass protect. I mean, they just had a lot of communication issues, and it's a better offensive line in general than people give it credit for, but it's obviously still a big need. So, what do you do?
I think communication has been the biggest problem in blitz pickup. I think they put Varga in a lot because they like the way when he actually gets his hands on a defender, I think he can do some good things. Same with Robinson. But, yeah, they've just been whipping on guys. They haven't been getting near the blitzers, and that's been the problem.
That's the one reason I think, Pagano was kind of holding off putting in reats, whatever, is because we've had so many different lineups in our offensive line. They were offensive line finding consistency with that, maybe even more important than putting. Maybe they're not putting the best guys in. Maybe Jonathan Harrison isn't playing, Joe isn't playing. But even if you don't have the best guys in, if they learn how to communicate together and pick up blitzes, that could make up for them not being the best, but they could still do enough. But they weren't doing either of those, so I think that's why it's always tough in the first 2 or 3 games of the season. You're like, are we going to shift around the offensive line already, or are we going to let it play out and see maybe if they can work together a little bit?
And then there's the question of if we're worrying so much about the blitz, maybe we shouldn't run an offense that encourages blitzing. But
yeah. I mean, you're right, and they have, and it's interesting because if you guys remember back to the playoff game against either Denver or the Bengals, when the way that they were counteracting the blitz was those little short dump offs to Dan Herron. We don't have that. I mean, Gore has actually been a lot better running than Herron ever really had, but they're not. The balance isn't really there, and the only way that they found balance in a non-existent run game last year was to pass. So which is interesting. Kyle's got to grab his laptop cable so we can kind of just chill here for a second.
I think Aaron almost had double-digit catches that game. He was up almost 30. He was over 20, 25 touches in that game total.
Yeah, I mean, it just absolutely. I mean, and they're not really doing any of that now. They're not. I don't really recall a whole lot of passes to Gore, not as many as to Herron, and they're not going to do that with Josh Robinson either. So I mean, it's been pretty interesting, kind of going forward.
I've been kind of confused why they took that element out of the offense. Gore's not a great receiving back, but he's pretty solid. I don't know why he hasn't been hardly used. They've thrown him a couple screen passes he couldn't get to. But for the most part, the running backs haven't been used in the passing game very much at all. And it's just, I don't know why that's happened.
And those checkdowns are so important, not just because of the rest of the way this offense is designed, but for Andrew's mental health or in his decision making. I think it just helps him so much to have a running back running a short crosser or someone in the middle of the field for him to check down to.
Yeah, and getting a consistent 4-yard play. Honestly, that's been something kind of missing from this offense. Is we've had a lot of 3rd and longs, and converting them had been pretty difficult at first. Hasselbeck was a little bit better at it, but I mean, just that you're right. That element, that taking the element of the checkdowns to the running backs or even the tight ends has been an interesting development in this offense.
I want to make one quick point with that. People always complain about Alex Smith, he does his checkdowns and stuff like that. That's what you do. That's kind of the worst part of it. But this is why the Patriots are always, no matter who they're throwing in there, they have Jonas Gray and Dion Lewis. No matter who they're putting in there, their philosophy is set so where they don't have to face 3rd and longs all the time. So where they can kind of have a consistency with play calling, where they're not running not running first and second deep bombs, and then third and down they have to run, and third down they have to do long passes again because it's 3rd and 8 and 3rd and 9. Like, this is, I don't know, I guess I don't understand why the NFL and more doesn't realize that this is a philosophy that works, and it just works. I mean, maybe the Patriots is like the prime example of it, and that's like the optimal way to use it. But I mean, I just don't get how more teams don't catch on to this. That when you do those short passes and you decrease the yardage on third down, that hey, you know what? You're more likely to convert.
I'll tell you a team that has picked up on that this season is the Bengals, and look where their offense is right now. Last year, Jeremy Hill was on a rampage, and that was why Giovanni Bernard didn't get it. And Gio was a little bit hurt, but Hill went on a rampage last year, and their offense was still mediocre. But now that they've got Gio and Eifert, they're using their their white passing catch tight end. They're using him a lot, and they're using Gio to catch the little burners out of the back, and their offense is taken off. I mean, it's absolutely incredible where their offense has been with Andy Dalton at the helm.
And this is what happens when you have an athletic offensive line. We have an athletic offensive line. We work best outside the hatches. That's why our counters and our traps work so well in the run game. You just think that they would catch on to this. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something too.
Well, and those little dump-offs, they're not just a 4-yard play. I mean, the Colts with luck, the Colts are actually decent at picking up third downs. The problem was they couldn't string together enough first downs, like on first and second down, to make it, to get consistent drives. Those little running back dump-offs, those shouldn't be just 4-yard plays, right? I mean, those should be plays where you catch the ball at 4 yards, and a lot of times those are resulting in first downs right off the bat, just because you get enough yards after the catch. I mean, they're just these little plays that kind of, those are the little sticky plays, like throughout the drives that you just, you throw in between the chunk plays. And the Colts just haven't had enough of those sticky, productive plays in between the big ones.
And in an offense like ours, when we've got, just a ridiculous amount of speed between Moncrief and Hilton and Dorsett, you're right. Those small dump-offs, they should be bigger than just 4 yards. We were talking about how much space just the presence of our new receiving core would create. And it really hasn't been there, and I don't blame the receivers for that because the deep ball just hasn't been there either. But we just got to fix this offense, man. I mean, the season's a bust if we don't. We were talking about drafting an outside linebacker in the first round and everything, but even if we fix this defense, nothing's going to matter if we can't get this back to where we were in 2014 or even 2013.
Last quick thing on the little dump-offs, the crossing patterns and everything else. I went back this week for a piece. I was trying to find Luck's interceptions, and I was trying to find an example where, like he missed a guy underneath, and he was trying to force the ball downfield and something like that. There's none. I mean, there's literally none. Every single one of his interceptions have come when you have all of your routes going down the field. You don't have any short things over the middle. The only time they did was the one where he missed Andre Johnson, and it tipped up in the air, and they got lucky. It was pick as whatever. Every other pick has been down the field because they've got 2 routes or 3 routes, and all of them are down the field and nothing over the middle.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. That's the kind of nuggets we bring you on the podcast for, Kyle. That's exactly why we're here. 2 more questions. We'll get 2 from the Twitterverse, and then we'll call it a night.
I'm sorry, I've got to take off right now. My laptop's dying, and I got to go somewhere. It was great to have you on, Kyle. We'll see you guys later.
Yeah, thanks,
see you, Garrett.
Bye, Garrett.
2 more. We'll make them quick. We have run a little longer than I was hoping.
Because someone was late, Brian.
Oh, woo.
Shrug.
What are you gonna do? This has been interesting coming from, especially from our little group, Draft Indy. Which current Colt tight end would you re-sign as a GM, or would you sign either?
Man, I hate this question so much because it's a question that I said all offseason that they needed 2015 to decide that question. Fleener hadn't been consistent enough. Allen hadn't been on the field enough to answer that question. And I don't think there's any more clarity through 5 weeks because Fleener's looked decent when he's been on the field. He has looked better than he has in the past. He's been a little more consistent. He still had the drops. He dropped the one game, his big game, which was against the Jaguars. I think he had that big game. first pass of the game, third down, right to him through his hands. Like, I mean, it's still an issue. But Fleener has missed, 2 of the 5 games. Or Allen has missed 2 of the 5 games. And when Allen's been healthy, Fleener is completely invisible. So no matter what quarterback, like Fleener caught 2 passes for 9 yards against the Texans last week.
Yeah.
So I don't think that question's been answered at all. So I don't. I mean, would I resign? I would probably resign one of them, but it'd be really cheap. And right now it's a coin flip. I need the rest of the season still. If Allen can stay healthy the rest of the season, it's Allen. But if not, then I guess it's Fleener.
I don't care. I don't care if Allen gets put on IR tomorrow. He called him Justin James Watt, and that made my day. I'm signing right now. He can take $10 million for all I care. Justin James.
Yeah, called out on the full name. Last question come from Jack Brown. I believe he's from overseas. I could be wrong, maybe from Canada, kind of the same thing. But which free agent would Kyle like in hindsight? There you go.
I saw he put in parentheses McPhee and Pernell McPhee, and I was looking back over the list of free agents, and I mean, they pretty much were all like either super expensive or just haven't been very productive. There was a couple that have been decent. McPhee has been really good, and I think especially considering the injury issues that the Colts have had, like with Jones going down, I think McPhee's presence would be huge. Arakpo has actually been decent in Tennessee, and he's another kind of edge guy that maybe would have been a better signing than Cole, although I think both of them are kind of in the same boat in terms of a complementarian pass rusher than anything else. But other than that, I mean, you look at, like, even looking at the wide receivers that were in free agency, I don't think I really wanted them to spend big money on anybody, so no. I mean, offensive linemen, same deal. There weren't really any good offensive linemen that got signed for anything that was manageable for Indianapolis. So, I mean, I'm for the most part, I'm still pretty happy with what they did in the offseason in terms of free agency. Frank Gore has been, I mean, amazing. I mean, he had his 2 fumbles on the goal line, and that sucks. And it killed. I mean, it took away 14 points, and maybe it cost them a shot to win that Jets game. But he's been awesome. Like, the contrast between him and what the Colts have had at running back for the last 4 or 5 years has been huge. Johnson obviously has been not good, and that's a signing that didn't pan out. But I think the idea behind it was a good one. I think that was the other thing I did notice looking at that list was maybe signing a guy like Stevie Johnson to play that role, to play kind of that possession role could have panned out a little bit better, and cheaper. But I mean, other than that, I think McPhee is the only kind of high impact guy that I kind of look at and say, okay, that could have worked out really well. But
that's fair enough, and I know James and I will agree that the Colts probably picked probably got one of the best value free agents in Dwight Lowry. For what he is, great price. And that was a great pickup, and it's already paid off dividends. It helped us win the Titans game. That's just some short examples. So I guess we're gonna wrap it up. Really appreciate you coming on, Kyle. We're gonna try and bring you back again, maybe midway through the season, and then again another quarter through the season, and then as we get into draft stuff.
No offense, we're gonna be talking about the same things. We'll be 6-5 and saying, oh, what are we gonna do? And we're like, oh, we're just gonna be hosting a playoff game at 8-8. We'll be hosting like Cincinnati's somehow not going to win the division, and we're going to host them in a playoff game again.
Yeah, I mean,
they'll get a playoff win, they'll save their jobs, and then we'll do this all again next year.
It'll be the same. The mediocrity will stay, and we'll just be Indianapolis, I guess. And
I got a quick question.
All right.
We didn't mention him close to enough. Is Henry Anderson already a Hall of Famer? I vote yes.
He's been super good. Like I mean, I liked him in the draft, but like all the hype, right? All the hype from PFF and all the draft, like, oh man, Henry Anderson is gonna be the steal of everything. He's gonna be better than Leonard Williams. Like, all right, he's not gonna make that kind of impact right away, but he's been awesome. I mean, you really couldn't have asked for more for the Colts in terms of that draft production. And really, we were talking about this before the season even started. You switch him and Philip Dorsett's draft position, and nobody says a word about what the Colts did in the draft.
Nope, not a single word. And you're right. I mean, steal of the draft conversation, works right up there with Anderson. We can see how things play out. Could we see a steal of the draft consideration from David Perry, 5th rounder?
Yeah, I think Perry's impact was overstated because he played so well in the preseason a little bit. I still think he's playing really well for a 5th rounder, but I don't think it touches what Anderson's done, even even with a couple rounds higher in terms of cost.
No, then that's very fair. So like I said, really glad you came on, and we'll bring you back. And so that's it for today's episode of the Draft Indy Podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Bye, guys. Thanks for coming on, Kyle.